I remember as a child, there were no bridges to West Point, just the little ferry boats from New Kent to West Point. We didn't get here very often when I was a child. My husband came here to work for Chesapeake right out of school, and he lived in Richmond. He rode the train down. He'd never heard of West Point. And he rode the train down. And he got out of the train, and someone was standing there, and he said, "Where's the streetcar?" He wanted to go up for his interview. And someone said, "Man, there ain't no streetcar in West Point."
When I was little, we had a big ice plant over on Kirby Street, and I loved to go there, and it was freezing cold inside. They'd have these big, huge blocks of ice, and I'd stand in there and watch the guys with those huge ice picks just go right down the line, and those blocks would come off exactly where he wanted it to, you know. And they delivered ice down Main Street in a truck, and tipped off what would fit into your refrigerator and brought it in those big tongs, and then go back out and, going back up the street. Oh, well, we had the community house, which was on the corner of 9th and Main, as Peggy, I think, was saying. And they just recently, in the last couple of years, tore that down, and it broke my heart because they had conducted different programs in this community house. It was a community house. I went there for art lessons. I never could draw. I can't draw today, but I did. I had a picture for many years of this beautiful flower that I drew. That was all that I've learned to draw. And then later on, they had dance classes, and my mother, every time something changed, I was right there signing up, whether I wanted to or not,
There were many functions there. At first, library was in that building. And by the way, I took tap dancing there from a lady by the name of Merle Jones, and used to go up to Miss Olson's, who was the founder of that community house, and dance for her, and put on programs for the women's club and that type of thing. There was a little bit of everything there. I even had my wedding reception there in 1950.
Now, I'm very familiar with the pickle factory because my first job was there repairing wooden crates, 10 cents an hour. But what they did there, they put up dill pickles. In fact, some of the manpower came from Indian Reservation, and the rest of them were ladies, they sorted pickles. And they would put up dill pickles in barrels, and down in the basement there, they have hundreds of barrels, and they're almost like a cure. I fished many a dill pickle out of those barrels. I love dill pickles. Then they had all pickles upstairs, all kind of what they did, they have the smaller pickles, real small ones, the sweet pickles, and they had big pickles. They put them in big barrels outside. They shipped all that to Baltimore in barrels. And then with cucumber trucks would line up all the way up to the highway to wait to be unloaded. Now, when the cucumbers are kind of over, they went to watermelon rinds. Well, they had trucks lined up in watermelon rinds. What they would do is remove the green, open up, cut the hearts out, throw it down a bank. That bank would be red with watermelon. I lived just across the field from the pickle factory. Brought in a big power plant right there near me. I could hear the diesel boom, 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 boom all day and night. What happened if they brought a power plant in here, big brick building, a diesel, and they need somebody to operate it. So they went out countrywide looking, and they found a man named Joe Moore. So they had a home right on the water there for him. That's right there by the old granary where it is located today on Pamunkey Avenue. They got him in here to operate that. Well, that's the beginning of the Moore family here because they wanted to operate the service station, Moore service station, over all these years. Now, that's the family. That's how they got involved in the service station because he was operating that diesel.
It looked like all of the home places that I remember had been destroyed because of, I guess in the name of progress, but I remember on 14th Street there were homes there, They are no longer there. You see a highway and cars coming in and out. But I remember when around the corner from me was a service station owned by an African American entrepreneur. There was a funeral home. Rich Forman was a restaurant owned by a teacher, a principal. And then there was a resident home where the Bingham's lived. There was the Temperance House, and then there was the Edwards House. And across the street, there was something like a restaurant owned by the Franklin Building. Then the Reverend John Scott, who was the pastor of the Episcopal Church here, lived across the street. There was another family next door, and a couple of more resident homes. But all of that is gone.
You could catch the Bristol Line's bus line to Richmond, which we often did, and go up in the morning and shop and then come back in the afternoon. But everything was right near home. You could just walk up to the grocery store or drugstore, and it was all walking distance. You didn't need a car to go anywhere. The bus took us right to Broad Street in Richmond, which was right across the street from those places. And so you was there was a barber shop in town, a fellow by the name of a black barber by the name of Charlie the Barber.
Yeah.
And if you went to Charlie the Barber, and his brother Howard worked there, and many a time I'd get my hair cut, and the bus came in about a half a block away. And when the bus would come in, if you were in the middle of a haircut, he was going to stop, because Howard was going to stop. He was going around and meet the bus and see who came and who was going. And then he'd come back and tell everybody there who was coming, who wondered why they were going and wondered why they came. And they were both World War I veterans. And they would relive the World War I story over and over.
Downtown West Point was booming. They had Leggett's. We had 2 drugstores. Of course, we always have insurance agents and banks, that type of thing. They had a store up by the Methodist Church, which has since been torn down.
Grocery store.
Grocery store, And up at 14th Street was big. You had York Inn on one corner. You had Robert Wyatt's Esso station on the other corner. You had West Point Restaurant on one corner. So
York Supply, and you had a York Inn.
York Inn was across the street from the West Point Restaurant. So like I said, at one time it was a booming place. It really was. I would love to have lived in the time when the terminal, the West Point Hotel, was there.
Southern Railway stopped right. This was the easternmost terminal for the Southern Railway. Anyway, when they moved to Portsmouth, we stopped having the degree of guests at the hotel, so the owner turned it into a boarding house. The boarding house, my grandfather, when he first married in the teens, lived there with my grandmother as a boarding house. And it burned in sometime in, I'm thinking 26 or something like that. And the owner was a good friend of my grandfather's. And their friendship enabled my grandfather to be given a picture as a souvenir that survived the fire. Whether there are any more, how many, I don't know, but that's the only one I've ever known of. So that's one of the original pictures, the picture in bold at the Terminal Hotel. There's a lot of speculation as to how that building burned, and I know how it burned. It's not. You don't see it written anywhere. But an old fireman came up to me when I first came back to West Point after coming back from Vietnam, and he was going to tell me I had a fire started. He said, "Well, come around the corner." He was like whispering. I was like on the street. Now, what's this big deal? And back then, you didn't talk about prominent people doing non-prominent things. Well, anyway, he said that I was the first one on the scene, and the fire started in the basement, and the owner's still in the basement blew up. And he swears that was the truth. Well, to me, that was one person telling me one thing. And I never really knew whether it's true or not, whether really something in the basement blew up or not, but it did burn. And when we started the West Point Historical Society, our first quarterly meeting, we had Dale Perry, who sat here, and Jesse Robinson, same age, talked to us about times living in West Point. And one of the things Jessie brought up was she was at Beach Park, which is right at the end of Main Street, right down here. Terminal Hotel was also on First Street. And she was at Beach Park playing as a little kid, and they heard this noise, and they looked over toward the hotel and saw this smoke coming out of the basement. So that's the second person that told me. So that kind of confirmed the story about how what really caused it to burn down. So
I remember when it wasn't Main Street. You came in around by the cemetery, by Mr. Guyer's place, down on what is now Lee Street. And then when they put in Route 30, they changed it and brought it down by the mill and did away with the liquor pond that was out there. And that has been moved across the railroad tracks now. But the Main Street then was on what is now Lee Street. That's where we came in to town. And I don't know, there was, they had somebody had a place where they killed hogs down there on 14th Street now. And you could hear the pigs squealing at school when they would bring a hog in and cut it up and package it all for people, grinded the meat into sausage if they wanted it and what have you. It was a different